Welcome back to the Code Ryan podcast today. Parth joins me, and our podcast today is mainly going to be about the kind of daunting topic of technical interviews. But before we get to that, Parth, could you maybe just give me a little bit of your story when it comes to your tech career so far, and then also maybe how you got interested in kind of technical interviews and why kind of that is been a little bit of your focus with some of the content that you've done.
Perfect. Yeah. So thank you so much for inviting me to this podcast, Ryan. I'm really happy to be here. So my name is Parth, and I have masters in computer science. On top of it, I have been in the tech industry for close to 10 years now. I'm based in Canada, and I have worked at companies like Microsoft, Nokia, and Royal Bank of Canada. And currently, I'm working in like the biggest movie theater chain that is currently present in Canada as a solutions architect. So I joined from the very low level as a junior developer, and then I make my way through to the architect position right now. And coming to your main question about why I got interested in technical interviews and stuff like that. So let me give you a quick background. Like, I also run a YouTube channel where I teach basically data structure and algorithm related technical interviews. Plus I talk about system design concepts and system design interviews. The main motivation to starting that channel was actually my wife. Like on December 2021, I found out my wife was pregnant, and she was going to be pregnant with twins. So my backstory at that point, I had been working with Royal Bank of Canada for the 5 years now, and I was pretty comfortable with my job. And it's a very common thing. You must have seen a lot of engineers go through that once they get into a company, if it's like moderately good environment and then they get comfortable, then you just don't want to leave. And I was in that phase of my career. But when I found out that my wife was going to have twins, and then I'm going to be bad. So of course, I'm going to be a dad. It was a great feeling. But next question was, I need to make some more money, and I need to do the things. So I was like, okay, let me try to aim for these FANG jobs, because that is like the go-to thing, the most, like, in terms of prestige, elite, I would say elitist. I want to use like a better word. Basically, like not being an elitist, but like at least gaining to that top spot. And so tech interviews needs quite a lot of preparation, and you will need to probably prepare for like sometime between 3 to 6 months. And I was not committed enough. So my wife was like, hey, why don't you just start a channel and have a goal that you are going to solve at least 2 questions a week and post it on YouTube. And that would be a way for you to stay committed to your preparation journey. So that was the beginning of it. And now I have around like 230 or 240 videos, and it's been, yeah. So now it's been the whole thing has shifted, and I did get a job at Microsoft, so it was a successful endeavor as well. So
awesome, cool. Well, it sounds like your kind of channel and interest in technical interviews kind of started from necessity, to where it's like, kids on the way, twins are on the way.
Exactly.
It's kind of a wake-up call to where, like, wow, I was kind of comfortable, but that's kind of like, all right, we need to kind of take this to the next level. Maybe shoot for a job that has, for the FANG jobs, the reality is that those are some of the highest compensation jobs, in which probably pretty decent job security as well, especially like once you have one of those companies on your resume, you can always go somewhere else as well if anything ever happened at those jobs. So I totally see the rationale for wanting to do that. I feel like, probably going to go the kids route here within the next handful of years. So I think I'll also be kind of feeling that wake up call a little bit as well. But
awesome. That's really good. And I totally agree to what you just mentioned, that once you have those companies on your resume, it's pretty easy to get somewhere else in the job market. And I can attest to that. I did got into Microsoft. I worked there for close to a year, and then I was also part of the layoffs that they had last year. So I got impacted with that. But that being said, I was pretty easily able to find like a decently well-paying job in Canada, despite the market being what it is. So I guess that played a huge role in having it on my resume.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of with that set up there, so I really like that you kind of went the YouTube route to study it, as I know for me personally, whenever there's a more technical topic, when I actually take the time to like teach somebody else it or explain it like verbally, it really helps me learn it. Like I know, so I've been at my current job for the last 3 or 4 years. And I know when I was studying for interviews back 3 or 4 years ago, one of the things that I would do is like not necessarily even write the code out for technical solutions and technical interview questions, but I would just verbalize them and explain like every step that I would need to take. And that really helped me kind of know whether I actually understood this issue or not, or if I'm just like memorizing the code to this exact problem. And, often in a technical interview, you don't get the exact problem you studied for, and you almost never get that. So being able to kind of reason about it, step through the problem, break it down, definitely helped me out a lot. So
Exactly. And on top of it, there is a saying that you only know that you have understood something if you can teach it to others. So yeah, I think that's the correct approach. That even when you are preparing, if you can explain it to someone else, that's the golden rule.
perfect. Well, now to kind of dive into the technical interview aspect a little bit more. So maybe for someone starting out, or maybe for someone that, didn't maybe approach a company that did more of those kind of hardcore technical interviews, what does like the technical interviewing process look like? Like, is it, just one simple question that they give you to kind of code out, or is it like a full day, or what does it kind of look like, the technical interview process?
For sure. So for every single company, you can expect somewhere between 3 to 6 rounds of interviews. And for the simplicity, we will just focus on the scenario where companies are considering data structure and algorithm based technical interview questions. Now, when we talk about interviews, there are mainly 3 categories. First one is the technical, second one is system design, and third one is behavioral. So technical interviews, they tend to be more focused towards any specific technology, or either like these DSA problems. You are given this kind of tree data structure or graph data structure, heap data structure. How would you work with that? And many times the problem is framed in such a way that it looks like a real life problem, because that's what tech companies do. If I give you an example, that you currently have a car and you want to take the picture of any particular city for every single street, and you want to create a system like Google Maps. So what approach are you going to take for your car to route over every single street and take those pictures? So how would that route look like? Now, at a glance, this seems like a genuine real world problem, but actually at the core of it, it's a data structure and algorithm related problem, where you have one node that needs to traverse over this huge map or a graph of different nodes, and how would you do that? So then it becomes a whole separate discussion. So this is the type of questions you can expect in a technical interview. Second type is a system design interview, where you dive deep into the vast sea of computational concepts. So if I ask you that, hey, if you have to design a system like Twitter or Google, how would you do that? And then we start discussing, or we start building the questions based on the answers you provide. And behavioral is quite simple. It's just asking about your previous experience to realize that whether you are a good culture fit or not. Are you a good person to work with? Are you like a person with bad attitude and that they really don't want to have? So that's there. These are the 3 main broader categories. Now, when you talk about the technical aspect, or that is what I personally found most challenging, because you rarely see that on a day-to-day job. System design, you are definitely going to encounter if you are up to that experience level. But technical questions, you don't see that on day-to-day job questions. So that's why they are really difficult to prepare for. Now, my personal suggestion, if you have no idea, I keep this book on my side of my desk, Cracking the Coding Interview. This is like the golden book because it has a lot of good information. So start from there. There are some pretty interesting YouTube channels as well. So you can also leverage that. But personally, I would suggest that start with learning any particular programming language, Java, Python, C, JavaScript, whatever you are comfortable with, and then learning what all the data structures are, and then start solving the questions on lead code. It's going to be a long journey, and if you want, like I have created like a list of 125 most popular, most asked, and most liked questions on based on FANG companies. So I can give you that link, and that link would be like a good starting point. But there are a lot of resources available.
Absolutely. And I'll definitely get that link to you or link from you. And for your YouTube channel, is it just your name or where can they find you on YouTube?
Sure. So my channel's name is Destination Fang, because when I was creating the channel, that was just like a random name. I know sometimes it might feel a little bit cringy, but I was like, I just don't want to change it. It is what it is. That's where I started with. So
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way about my channel. It's like Code Ryan. It's like, I guess, whatever at this point. But yeah, cool. Well, I'll definitely have your channel linked as well as, any resources that you send across my way. I'll make sure that that's all linked in the description as well. So kind of with that, it sounds like for like a general technical interview, it's kind of separated into the three parts. You have behavioral, and then you have the system interview, and then you have the more kind of algorithmic question per se, to where they don't really, phrase it as, okay, use breadth first search to traverse this data and then find the best solution here. They'll say it in more of like just a general kind of real world example, but then it's your job to kind of break it down into, oh, this is a graph problem, or, oh, this is, I need to do breadth first search, or whatever it might be. So kind of with that set up, even if someone is more, say it's just entry level, are they also going to have these three separate, like a systems interview as well as a technical interview? As I know that when I was studying for some of this a handful of years ago, I know that maybe more entry level, maybe you wouldn't have to worry as much about maybe the systems interview.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Or how does that kind of look, and how does like your experience level and what kind of role you're applying to play into what this kind of interview looks like?
Yes, exactly. So these are the three broader categories, but depending on your level of experience and the type of job you are applying for, the importance of each interview would increase or decrease. Now, if you are at an entry level position, it's very unlikely that you would be asked a system design interview. Mostly they are going to be focused more on your technical experience, what kind of basic knowledge you have, on top of it your behavioral scenario. And even in the behavioral interviews, it would mostly be related to how did you perform in school projects, and you can give those sorts of examples because you don't have the real world working experience. So companies understand that. But the higher you go in the experience chain, the more emphasis are on the system design interview. And after maybe like 10 or 15 years of experience, there is even higher emphasis on behavioral interviews, because then you would be in the position of maybe a director or a project lead or something like that, where they really wants to make sure that you have those leadership capabilities on top of the technical and system design knowledge. So there is always going to be the waning priorities depending on what sort of role you are applying for. On top of it, though there are just three categories of interviews, you can expect somewhere between 3 to 7 rounds of interviews. And many times how they would be scheduled is that first you will have your call with recruiter. Then depending on company, some companies send out those online coding assessments, some companies don't. So you might have to go through that. After finishing that, you might have a phone call interview with one of the technical guys. It could be either phone technical interview if you are applying for like a more developer level position, or maybe telephonic system design interview, where they can ask you that, hey, if you have to build your tiny URL, how would you do that? So that would be sort of the initial process to wean out the unwanted candidates. And then they might have like 3 to 5 candidates selected for the final big panel interview, where it could be anywhere between 2 to 4 hours of maybe back-to-back interviews, or maybe they do it within different chunks depending on the availability of the interviewers. But that is going to be the major component. So it's a lengthy process. Many times it can take somewhere between like 1 month to 3 months to complete the whole interview process. So not only the technical system design and behavioral aspect, but you also need to have patience to go through this whole journey. So that's, many times people, if you are in a desperate situation, I can imagine that it becomes really hard you have all of these interviews and still no result. And imagine after 3 months, you realize that you did not get selected. That's heartbreaking.
Absolutely. And I know I've definitely heard people on podcasts and social media mention that, it's really hard to approach FANG when you're already working in the field and you're not just coming out of school. Because when you are coming out of school, at least you can, like while you're finishing school, you can be studying for your technical interviews and preparing for that and putting a lot of time into that. And you also, might have a few months there to where it's not a big deal if like you live at home for a few months while you're kind of going through this long process and stuff like that. But, say for you, like you have twins and then you're already working your full-time job, for you to take, a few months off to then prepare for technical interviews and then go through that 2 or 3 month process. And then, if you don't get it, that's like 5 months of your time to where you're preparing, studying, spending really long hours. And it's really hard for someone in that position. But I think it's also good to, make it known that it is quite the lengthy process to where, like you said, you have that first call with that recruiter. And then after that, you might have like maybe a leak code problem that you have to solve. And then maybe after that, you have your first kind of call with an actual engineer at that company or someone at that company doing a technical interview. And then after that, you might move on to like a full day of stuff. So it is quite the lengthy process for sure.
Exactly. And not only that being but I mean, if you are a person with a lot of responsibilities, for sure it's really difficult to prepare for that. But there is also that I would say that final bonus if you do get in. And the other thing is, you only need to prepare it once. Maybe if you spend enough, like once, if you dedicatedly spend like 3 to 6 months to prepare for all of this stuff, maybe for some reason, even if you don't get a job at one company or other company, still that preparation would always remain with you. So next time it would not be that difficult. And eventually, it's my personal opinion that every engineer should change jobs somewhere between like 2 to 3 years for at the initial stages, before they decide that now I want to get comfortable or spend the rest of my career maybe in this company or that company. Yeah, so always you are going to be going through that 6 month long interview process. So always, prepare it once, and then next time you just have to brush up those concepts, maybe practice just a few lead code problems, and then you would be good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and absolutely. I do want that to come across as I don't think someone should approach FANG or anything like that because of the process, but just to be aware that it is definitely a long process. But like you said, once you prepare once, even if you don't get that job after a few months of preparation, you're still pretty well prepared at that point to, start interviewing at other jobs and things like that. And I also like your point on like when you're starting a career, often it can be good to, hop a little bit from job to job every couple of years, as not only does that give you a lot of experience kind of working with different teams and working in different areas of the code stack and figuring out what you really like, but also I believe there's some research on switching jobs more often early in your career. You end up actually earning more money throughout the life of your career, because often when you switch jobs, you get potentially a bump in salary more than what you would get if you just stayed at your current job. So definitely some reasons to do that, although I've stayed at my current job for 3 or 4 years now. So definitely does depend. I also work at a startup, so I get to work throughout the whole code stack anyway. So some days I feel like my job is completely different than others. So there's definitely different ways to approach it for sure.
Exactly. Like I was at a job for almost 5 years, and I was really happy there. So there is nothing wrong in staying longer period. But again, I agree with your point. If you change jobs, not only you get the bump in the salary, but also you understand that how different companies work, and you build that battle experience. You gain that how the fresh perspective. So whenever, even at a new company, if you are sitting in the room and you are brainstorming some new project, new product, you can have more perspective to offer, and that's why you become more value. You are generating more value, and the impact is quite visible. So that's why a person staying in the same company for 15 years or a person who jumped around at 4 different places and then came back at the same company, they both are going to have vastly different mindsets and how they approach things. So that increases your USP as well.
Yep, absolutely. And when it comes to kind of different companies and technical interviews, so does everybody need to be prepared for like these kind of technical interviews and these full days of interviewing, or is that kind of left a bit more towards the FANG companies and maybe startups don't do it so much? Or what, say someone decides they don't want to go through this process. Is there a way to avoid it? Like, can they just apply for different jobs, or what does it kind of look like maybe from different types of jobs and what they might expect in terms of the interview process?
For sure. So not all companies do that, because this is a very resource intensive process from the company's perspective as well. Think of having 7 rounds of interview, which means there are at least 7 work hours of executive level people spent just by interviewing one person. So that's a very expensive endeavor to take. Not all companies do it. Many companies, they are going to have specific positions dedicated for a specific role. So they might have just 1 or 2 rounds of interview. They might just start diving deeper into asking questions. Maybe if you are applying for Java or Python developer job, they just ask that, hey, what is your efficiency in coding for those particular languages? And if you are good, you are hired. If that's not good, maybe we will start and look after some other people. So there is always going to be that possibility where you don't have to go through always all of these different rounds of interviews. It's sort of, I've seen that the larger the company or the larger the enterprise, a company which has more products, lot of projects ongoing, they might have such rigorous process because they don't know what type of project you are going to be working upon. So that's why they try to do a generic hire with a candidate who has like smart fundamental knowledge and also who is able to cope up in such a fluid and fragile environment. So that goes your question. Now, second thing I wanted to bring out is there is also one more way. Once you have maybe like 4 to 5 years of seniority and you become expert in anything. Maybe let's say you are pretty good with cloud computing. You are pretty good with maintaining our infrastructure in Azure or AWS cloud or something like that. There is also a possibility of becoming contractor. Typically, what I have worked as a contractor as well for a few months. Now, typically in a normal contractor position, there would most likely be going to be just 1 or 2 rounds of interviews. You are paid extremely well because you are being paid on the hourly basis, and then you can incorporate yourself, which means you are charging the tax to the company as well, and you get that added benefit of income. You don't get the normal full-time employee benefits. Plus, there is a risk that your contract might end anytime. So there is always going to be the contest between the stability and the opportunity. So working as an IT contractor is really lucrative, but you will have to develop that niche. Second, you will have to find that specific companies or that specific roles. If you can do that, I have seen people getting salaries like $120, $130 an hour for the same work that they were doing for maybe like $80,000 a year. So if you see the pay disparity, it's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, though, there definitely is that trade-off to where usually if a company falls on hard times, typically the contractors are kind of the first to go, and then the salaried employees are a little bit more sticking power and stay around a little bit more. But like you said, there's also the benefit of if you're a contractor and you're really good at what you do and you have a really kind of carved out kind of niche there, you can also earn quite a bit more than what you would earn at just a salaried position. So definitely pros and cons for sure. And I totally agree with your points earlier regarding kind of the larger the company, the more likely your interview is going to look like the kind of classic FANG interview of kind of a technical problem, maybe a systems problem, then behavioral, so on and so forth. But for a startup like my current company I work at, it was basically a intro call with our HR person. And then after that, I had a technical interview with our engineering manager, but it was less so like a data structures and algorithm question. It was more so like, okay, can you build this component in React.js or explain these different things about JavaScript? It was like more kind of focused to the technologies I would be using rather than like just some general question like, okay, if we're building Google Maps, what would this look like? So I think that's definitely some differences I noticed. I definitely think that if you want to kind of avoid some of the more kind of daunting data structures and algorithms questions, going smaller kind of towards a startup is probably a bit better bet there.
Exactly. No, I 100% agree on that aspect. That in my personal advice, like if anyone is starting out or they are new in your career, if you get a chance, try to work at a startup, which you are already doing. So that's pretty good because at a startup, you are bounded with so many different responsibilities that within couple of years you gain the experience worth of 5 to 6 years. You learn quite a lot because they are always stretched out in terms of resources, and they are trying to build this product and make something big out of where they are. So always, if you can work at a startup company, next, if possible, at least do contracting for 6 months to a year or maybe 2 years. If your financial conditions or if your family conditions allow for that, because in the contracting you don't get health benefits, you don't get some retirement saving benefits and things like that. So it's an individual who should make that decision. But early in your career, if you get a chance, work at a startup. It's going to be really helpful. Plus it's very exciting because you're building something new from scratch, and yeah, you get that motivation. You don't get fatigue of just working like 9 to 5, and then yeah.
And that matches my experience at a startup. Like I came in as like a React JavaScript developer, but I've worked with Django, Python, Kubernetes, AWS, like just everywhere across the stack. I'm doing like cron jobs, background tasks in the background. And I'm like, man, I never would have thought I would be able to do this coming as a JavaScript developer, but you really learn a ton. And it also allows you to kind of learn how different pieces fit together. Like, how does our application actually get deployed? And we use like Terraform for that. And then how does kind of our backend integrate with our front end? And it really gives you the skills to kind of work everywhere across the stack, which is just going to make you what I think is a much better developer, rather than if you really just stayed on, just doing stuff in JavaScript at a large company for, 10 years. So I think that's great advice there. But just a few minutes left here before we wrap. Is there any kind of like general mistakes that someone should look out for when they're kind of approaching these technical interviews? Like I know when I was studying for them, one big one was like, don't just jump straight to the problem and try to code, really try to break it down and try to, step it through. But do you have any kind of general mistakes like that someone should avoid when going into these interviews?
Sure. So actually, just on that topic, I think last week I just created a video on all the mistakes that you should avoid. I can name few that I have personally done and I have experienced others doing. So number one, like of course, always make sure that you are prepared. Convey your thoughts. So communication is really important. You might know all the answers and you might know all the things that you are doing, but not saying out loud to the interviewer feels sort of a little bit of disrespected, and also interviewer might feel that yes, you know the technical stuff, but you are not explaining. So are you going to be a good co-worker to work with? Do I really want a person who is basically just getting it done as if for the sake of doing it, or explaining his or her thought process, explaining different ideas, different various syntax, asking clarifying questions. So always make sure to do that. And on top of it, keep the time management in mind, because many times for any technical interview, the interviewers might have prepared somewhere between 2 to 4 different questions. And if you are just stuck on one single problem, then it feels really bad. And if you get stuck, it happens to anyone. No one is 100% on all the things. Don't feel shy to ask for hints or ask for suggestions, or whatever idea you propose. Give example of both the sides and then clarify with your interviewer that, are you okay with this? Do you think that we should proceed to coding now? Do you think that this approach is better? This is the time complexity and this is the space complexity I'm proposing. Are you fine with that? So these small tweaks is going to make significant improvement in the chances of you getting hired.
I think that really covers technical interviews. I think it, definitely was a really nice refresher for me, as well as I've kind of just, left this subject for the last few years because I, just didn't worry about it. Although, I generally think that if I were to, take, even an hour every week to kind of just stay current with technical interviews, that would probably be a good idea. But, with all other responsibilities in life, it's kind of hard to kind of stay on with that. But I think it was a really great refresher for me. And I think you did an awesome job kind of explaining this. So one more time, where can people kind of go to find your YouTube channel? And is there any other resources to where you want to recommend people go to or anything like that?
On YouTube, you can find my channel as Destination Fang. I think it should come up as the first or second result. And in terms of the resources I mentioned, so what I have created a Google Doc where I have posted all the questions that you should start preparing for, and I update it quite frequently. I took all the data from Lead Code about which questions have been the most popular ones that has been most like and most asked. Plus, I have explained explicitly based on each company that which company asked this question how many times in the recent 6 months or 1 year. So it would be a good starting point. On top of it, I'll send you few more links about different aspects that they can prepare for. These are just generic, like normal things that would help you out, help you understand the whole framework, and uh, how can you make the day plan for if you are planning for 3 months. Within 3 months, you want to get ready. What should be your approach? That in week one, I'm going to learn this. In week two, I'm going to learn this and whatnot. So I'll send you all the links. Maybe you can post that and people can find it out.
Perfect. That sounds great. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Parth. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience did as well. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Ryan. It was really a pleasure being here. Thanks a lot. Bye.